Hey there, and welcome into another episode of the Route 1 Rundown. I'm your host, Steve Corgi, and I'm thrilled to be back for another episode to talk some Terps. But before I dive into Maryland's 83-75 win on the road at Nebraska, a reminder that if you are listening to this show, but you want to be watching it, you gotta go and check it out on YouTube. It's part of the Department of Hoops, a DMV media network. It's an awesome place for all of your local hoops needs. So if you love local basketball, then you gotta go and check out the Department of Hoops. Give it a like, subscribe, check out all the great shows that we have over there at the Department of Hoops. That's youtube.com/@Department of Hoops. But without further ado, let's dive right into this because I am recording this just moments after Maryland picks up its third road win of the season, an 83-75 nail-biter, another nail-biter. There are always nail-biters on the road against the Cornhuskers in Nebraska. And with that, Maryland moves to 19-6 overall, 9-5 in the conference, and Maryland is right there fighting for that double bye, top four in the Big Ten. They're sitting at 9-5, tied with UCLA, a half game back of Wisconsin, who is sitting at 9-4. And of course, Maryland would have the head-to-head tiebreaker over both of those schools, beat each of them at home. They would also have the head-to-head tiebreaker over Illinois, who's sitting a half game behind the Terps at 9-6. So this was a big one for Maryland to go out and get. It was also a big one from an NCAA tournament perspective because that's another quad one win for Maryland. Nebraska in the top 50 of the net rankings at the time this game took place, number 47. That'll be another quad one win for Maryland, and we'll put them at 6-5 over 500 in quad one games. So a great night all around if you're a Terps fan. So how did Maryland do this? How did they win it? Well, to me, this game was all about the offense and the way that the offense was able to respond at each and every turn. And there were a bunch of moments in the first half that I could reference where Nebraska hit a three. That place was going crazy. Pinnacle Bank Arena, really good crowd, really good fan base there in Nebraska for just every sport, whether it's football, basketball, volleyball, you name it. That crowd knows how to go crazy for the Huskers. And they were into it tonight. And every time Nebraska made a push, Maryland responded. And there were a bunch of times in the first half where Nebraska hit threes, the place was going crazy, and Maryland responded. But really, you don't have to look any further than the last 5 minutes or so of that game because you had several instances that come right to my mind. Under 5 minutes to go, Worcester hits a wild three for Nebraska. It was right after a Juju Reese block. It was a good defensive possession by Maryland. I thought they played great defense throughout, and Worcester just goes up and hits this wild three to cut it to a 2-point game. Well, what does Maryland do? They go right down the court, get it to Derek Queen inside where Maryland dominated all night, and Derek Queen had a great game, and we'll talk about that in just a minute here, but they go get it right to Queen. Queen gets a bucket. They push it back to 4. Again, a few minutes later, Nebraska cuts it back to 2 at 73-71. Well, Jacoby Gillespie, I wouldn't say he had a quiet game. He had 15 points, but it wasn't it just didn't feel like the loudest game from Jacoby Gillespie. Maybe a little bit overshadowed by some of the plays Selton Miguel made, by Derek Queen's great night with 24 points, 9 of 11 from the floor. But Jacoby Gillespie, when they needed him most, came up with a big bucket. Again, Nebraska cuts it to 2 late in this game. The place is going crazy. At this point, it's 75 let's see, what was it? It was 73-71, about 2.5 minutes to go. It is part of Nebraska's parade to the free throw line in the last couple of minutes of this game. And with just under 2 minutes to go, Jacoby Gillespie drives left, splits the defense, gets back to his right hand, and finishes the layup to push the lead back to 4. Again, Nebraska cuts it down to 2. Rodney Rice gets to the lane. And Rodney Rice, like I've been talking about, Rodney Rice, not just a three-point shooter. Rodney Rice is showing game in and game out now that he can do more than just shoot from the outside. And he had a really big shot earlier in the game, a wild shot that looked like a prayer that somehow went in. But Rodney Rice, in a big moment, got to the bucket. He goes 5 of 9 from inside the arc tonight. He scores 14 points, only one of them a three-pointer. I think Rodney Rice, game after game right now, is showing he can do more than just shoot from beyond the arc. As good as a three-point shooter as he is, he can do more than that. So Rodney Rice, about a minute and a half left, he gets to the lane. He pushes it back to 4. And that's what Maryland was doing all night long. One more time Maryland responded in the last couple of minutes there. One more time, Nebraska gets it back to a 2-point game at 77-75. And Selton Miguel, who had a fantastic game. I mean, my man was on fire early. 3 of 4 from 3 at one point in the game. Just a game after a great one against Rutgers. I can't remember offhand what he went against Rutgers from beyond the arc. I tweeted it out because he's just been so hot these past 2 games, game and a half. 3 of 4 from deep at one point in the first half. 5 of 8 from beyond the arc against Rutgers. So Selton Miguel, who had a really nice game, and Selton Miguel, who sometimes, let's say, he when he's feeling hot, he's feeling hot. He's a guy who will give you a heat check every now and then. Late in that game, Selton Miguel fakes a 3, and you gotta respect his three-point shooting prowess because we've seen what he can do. I just referenced the numbers the past couple of games. He ends up going 3 for 5 on the night from beyond the arc, but Selton Miguel's a guy who's shooting over 43% from 3 this season. You gotta respect the 3. So Selton Miguel fakes a 3. He could have put up a more contested 3, and at times throughout the season he has, right? Especially when he's feeling it, and you can't blame him really because of how hot he can get. But he fakes the 3, steps in, hits a floater along the baseline to give Maryland the 79-75 lead, and it's a lead they would never relinquish. So this was another game where Maryland played great in the first half. They get up, score 42 points in the first half. They're up 7 at halftime, and the second half was a battle. The second half was a rock fight like it so often has been on the road. And there were times in this game where you felt like, okay, here we go again. Is Nebraska going to do the same thing that Ohio State did to Maryland? Is Nebraska going to do what Purdue was able to do to Maryland, what Oregon was able to do to Maryland, while the Terps were trying to get road wins? But tonight, to me, this game was about how Maryland's offense responded at every single turn. Every time Nebraska got close, every time you thought, could this be the moment, Maryland responded in a big way. And it was a different guy every time. All those examples I just went through. I talked about Jacoby Gillespie. I talked about Derek Queen. I talked about Rodney Rice. And I talked about Selton Miguel. And I could talk about Julian Reese if I talk about some of the moments earlier in the half. But just in the last 5 minutes there, you had everybody contributing. 4 of 5 starters that I mentioned just in those sequences there. And Maryland's offense really thrived throughout this game. Maryland's offense responded at each and every turn. And Maryland's offense, I think, is what's driving this team right now. If you ask me, is Maryland an offense or defense-oriented team? To me, it's offense at this point. To me, you are looking at a borderline elite offense. Right now, Maryland's offense up to number 16 in KenPom, the defense number 22. It's unbelievable to be in the top 25 in both. But I'm trusting this Maryland offense right now more than I am the defense. Not to say that the defense is necessarily a liability, but the offense is elite. And, I talked a few episodes ago about what Maryland is missing defensively, and I do think Maryland's missing an elite on-ball defender who can guard the best guards in the country, who can just lock down the best guards in the country. And, are there ways to work around that? Yes, absolutely. But that's something that Maryland is missing, I think, on the defensive end. On the offensive end, Maryland has it all right now. Obviously, Maryland has an unbelievable inside presence with Reese and Queen. They have the shooting with those three guards. Maryland in the top 50 in the country in three-point shooting percentage as a team at 37.1%. You see guys like Rodney Rice and Selton Miguel starting to show off more of their games, that they can score at all three levels, that they're not just outside shooters. And I thought Maryland did a really nice job tonight of moving the ball, particularly in the first half. That was something I took note of. But Maryland ends up, let's see what the numbers are here, 15 assists on 31 made field goals. Really good night for Maryland moving the ball against a Nebraska defense that can be very aggressive, that did force some turnovers at times, but it's a Nebraska defense that's a little unique. It's very aggressive, and it can cause some problems for teams. And I thought Maryland did an excellent job moving the ball, particularly in the first half. And this is a Maryland offense that I think is really the driver of this team. And on this particular night, we saw great games again from both Derek Queen and Selton Miguel. Derek Queen, I mean, what more can you say about the guy? 36 minutes, 9 of 11 from the floor, 100% at the line, 6 of 6 from the line. He finishes with 24 points, 11 rebounds, and my favorite moment of the game that I can't believe we're not seeing this highlight on Twitter all over the place. I was looking for it, but at one point in this first half, Derek Queen is on the break. He goes behind the back, and then he dishes to Selton Miguel for the layup. It showed off everything that I'm always raving about, that I love so much about Derek Queen, which is his ability to handle the ball, his court vision, his intelligence on the basketball court. The guy can do it all, and he's only a freshman. And I stepped away to record this, but after the game, in the post game, Andy Katz, Robbie Hummel, and Mike Hall were discussing who the Big Ten freshman of the year is. And to me, look, Ace Bailey, he has a really good case, but I think it's Derek Queen. I absolutely think it's Derek Queen. You look at what Derek Queen is doing on a night in and night out basis, and at this point, he's leading this Maryland team in scoring. And it's a Maryland team that has some really good scorers on it. He is second on the team with 8.5 rebounds. The guy's averaging 15.5 points, 8.5 rebounds. And it's just, if you watch the games, you see his skill set. You see what he can do. I don't know how Derek Queen isn't your Big Ten freshman of the year. And I know Ace Bailey was under the weather when they went head-to-head last week, but Derek Queen had one of his best games of the season against Rutgers, going for 29 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists. And they flashed the stat up during the game. I can't remember. I wish I could remember exactly what it was. I think it was the freshman this season who had 20 points and 10 rebounds most often. Well, it was Derek Queen ahead of Ace Bailey there. It was Derek Queen ahead of Cooper Flagg there. So, look, Derek Queen is in elite company, and I think if you watch what he's doing, you watch how he's playing, you see how he contributes to this team, and not only that he's just contributing to his team, he's contributing to a team that could end up finishing in the top 4 in the Big Ten. He's contributing to a team that I think has essentially locked up an NCAA tournament bid at this point. I mean, it would take an absolute collapse at this point, with Maryland now sitting 9-5 in the conference, for them to miss the NCAA tournament. So you're not just talking about a guy who's contributing. You're not just talking about a guy who has had a very good individual season. You're talking about a guy who is contributing to the success of a very good basketball team. So I can't say enough about Derek Queen tonight and what he brought to the table. And then Selton Miguel. Look, there are some question marks with Selton Miguel at times, mainly around his shot selection. Maybe around, hey, did you need to take that shot at that time in the game when you were guarded? But you know what you can't argue with? You can't argue with 8 of 13 from 3 over the last 2 games. You can't argue with back-to-back 17-point outputs, and you cannot argue with what he did at the end of the game, faking that 3, getting in getting inside the arc and hitting a floater along the baseline. That was crucial because at that time, Maryland did not seem like they could get a stop. At that time, it seemed like Maryland was going to have to keep scoring, and that was a huge bucket at a huge time. So got to give a lot of props to Selton Miguel for the way he played tonight as too. And then you look at Maryland's starting five and what they brought to the table. And Maryland's starting five in this game, and you can take this either as a good thing or a bad thing, and I think it's a mixed bag here. Maryland's starting five scored all 83 points in this game. Nobody off the bench scored. And tonight was another night where Maryland was without Tafara Gapare, still out with an illness. But Maryland starting five, Rodney Rice, Jacoby Gillespie, Julian Reese, Derek Queen, Selton Miguel. It's a weird order. I'm just reading it in the order it is on KenPom listed here. I don't know why he lists it that way. There was no rhyme or reason to it. But those five guys, those five starters, scored all 83 points. And all of those guys were in double figures. In fact, Julian Reese scored the fewest points with 13. So you're getting a ton out of these starters right now. And it's a really good thing because I think this is a starting five. And I said it during the group chat I have during the game. But then in the post game, on the Big Ten Network post game, they were talking about it as well. I think this is a starting five that can compete with really any starting five in the country. There's a ton of depth within the starting five. One of the best things about this team is that anybody can go off any night. You know, you never know who's going to be the hero. You never know who's going to step up. We've seen each and every one of these starters. Gillespie, we've seen it a million times. Rodney Rice, we've seen it. Selton Miguel, now we've seen it. And certainly Julian Reese and Derek Queen. We have seen all of them step up and be the guy on any given night, which is what I think makes this team so dangerous. But on the flip side, if there is a concern, and, you know, at this point, I think we really are nitpicking when you're looking at a team that's 19-6, 9-5, feels like a lock to make the NCAA tournament in mid-February. You're nitpicking when you're starting to think about, like, okay, in March, how does this team advance, or what stops them from being a real Final Four contender? And I feel like the lack of a lockdown defender on the perimeter is one of those things. The bench might be one of those things right now as well, because tonight the bench played between Deshaun Harris-Smith, Jordan Geronimo, and Jay Young. Those three guys were the only guys who came off the bench tonight. They played just 17 minutes. None of them scored. It was not an impressive performance by the bench. Now, I think there's a very valid question to ask, okay, how does that change when Tafara Gapare comes back? Because he's been very effective this year for Maryland. He's been that energy guy. You hope he comes back, especially it's an illness. It's not like an injury that he'll have to work his way back from. And you would imagine he can come back. He can provide something off the bench. But does that become a problem for this team at some point down the line? Does it become a problem? We've seen when Jacoby Gillespie this year has gotten into foul trouble. That's been a problem for him. Against Ohio State, it was an issue. That was one of his, I think that was one of his worst games, along with the Washington game where he actually fouled out. So does that become an issue for Maryland if Jacoby Gillespie gets into foul trouble and then Jay Young has to play major minutes in a Big Ten tournament game, in an NCAA tournament game? Can he handle that? Can the offense run as effectively, as smoothly? You're going to need those guys at some point. And we've seen Jay Young give good minutes at various points throughout the season. We've seen Deshaun Harris-Smith give good minutes. We've seen him hit a big three. We've seen him play good defense at times. We've seen Jordan Geronimo contribute. Tonight wasn't the night where they were contributing, and that is just a question, is how much can they get out of those guys on the bench, and how much will it matter once we get into the postseason here? So that's one of the questions that I have coming out of tonight. But all in all, tonight, a really good win against a Nebraska team that looks to be like a tournament team. They're fighting for a tournament bid at this point. They're top 50 in the net, but Pinnacle Bank Arena, a very tough place to play. The last time Maryland was there, I think it was Willard's first season, 2023. That was a game where Maryland felt like that was one, it felt like they could and should win. I think that was the Keisei Tominaga game, a really good guard that they have who hit a big shot at some point in that game. Maryland lost in overtime in that one. It's a tough place to play, and especially against a team this season who's been playing very well. They came into this game winners of 4 in a row and really had some momentum going. And I think it says a lot that Maryland was able to go in there tonight and get that win. Now, they were without their big man, so Maryland, of course, did have an advantage inside there, and they took advantage of it. You look at the points in the paint in this one, and I got to bring it up here. Let's see if I can find points in the paint. They referenced it in the broadcast several times throughout the night. Maryland was really effective inside tonight. I'll tell you that much while I look for these numbers here. So at the rim, Maryland got to the rim 21 times in this game. They were 15 of 21 at the rim. A really good night. And I mean, you can probably imagine when you have Derek Queen going 9 of 11 that those numbers are going to look pretty good. As far as points in the paint go, Maryland outscored Nebraska 42-26. So a good job by Maryland of taking advantage of the mismatch, of taking advantage of Nebraska missing a key piece in their big man. And Maryland did really, really well in that regard. And I thought Braxton Mia, their 7-footer, ended up giving them really good minutes and causing Maryland some issues, but it wasn't enough. Maryland was able to take advantage of that mismatch, and that's what good teams do. So I think this, all in all, was a really good win for Maryland tonight, and I think you can now put to rest this narrative that Maryland can't win on the road. Look, winning on the road in a power conference is hard. It's a hard thing to do. And I know that sounds like coach speak, but I'm going to bring out the numbers on it again, because this season Big Ten teams have won 62% of conference home games. So 6 out of every 10 home games, the home team is winning. It's hard to win on the road in a power conference league. And Maryland, now 4/5 of the way through the conference schedule, they've played 8 out of 10 games. They're 3-5. And I want to look here and see what the rest of the league is in their home games, because I can't imagine that anybody has an outstanding conference record. So the best road team right now is Michigan at 5-2. Purdue's 5-3. Michigan State's 4-2, but they've only played 6 road games. But you look at the rest of the league now, and it stacks up like right there with Maryland. Wisconsin 4-4, UCLA 3-4, Illinois 4-4, Ohio State 3-5, USC 3-3, Nebraska 4-5, Oregon 4-4, Indiana 3-5, and then you get to the bottom of the league here, where Maryland's much better than these teams. Iowa 1-5, Rutgers 2-5. Minnesota 2-4, Northwestern 0-8, Washington 1-6, Penn State 1-7. So let's put to bed this narrative that Maryland can't win on the road, because they went out and they've proven it now. They've won at Illinois, they've won at Indiana, and now they've won at Nebraska. And certainly Illinois is a tournament team. Nebraska very well could be a tournament team, and Maryland has proven they can win on the road. Yes, they've let a few slip away. Would you like to have gotten one more? Absolutely. But that's why it was so big that they got that win tonight. And to me, it's a team that is playing with a lot of confidence on the road, because you see how they play in the first half of these games. You see how they perform, whether it's against Ohio State, they got out to a great start. Tonight, they got out to a great start. But the difference was tonight they were able to finish it. But they've gotten off to good starts throughout the season, whether it was against Oregon, whether it was against Purdue. This team is not lacking confidence on the road. This team is they don't look as scared, nearly as scared as the fan base does when they go on the road. They look like a team that believes that they can win on the road, and they did it tonight. They're now sitting at 3-5. And, again, I went through the Big Ten. I went through the other teams in the Big Ten and their road record, but you look nationally, and, certainly you get the very top of the sport, you get a team like Alabama that's 8-1 on the road, Duke 7-1, Auburn 6-1, Houston 6-0. Those are the elite of the elite. Those are the teams that are expecting to go to a Final Four this year. But you look at some of the other schools out there, like a Kansas is 3-5, same record as Maryland. Kentucky 2-4. Maryland is right there with these other schools when you look at the road record at this point. Maryland, to me, at 3-5 on the road, it's not an outlier. It's not a negative. It's not something that should be a black mark on their resume come Selection Sunday. So it was huge for Maryland to get this win tonight. And now you look ahead. Now you look at what's next, because Maryland has a real opportunity looking forward, because the next 3 are at home. Maryland has 3 in a row at home, starting with Iowa on Sunday, followed by USC and Michigan State. And Iowa and USC, those are going to be quad 2 games, but Michigan State is going to be a quad 1 game. And if Maryland wants to finish in the top 4, if Maryland has aspirations of getting still a 4 or 5 seed, maybe a 3 seed, maybe up to a 3 seed. I mean, you look at bracket matrix right now, Wisconsin is listed as a 3 seed. They have an average of a 3.48 seed. They're either a 4 or 3 seed in all the brackets that I'm looking at right now. So why can't Maryland go out and get a 3 seed when you compare them to Wisconsin? When you compare them to a Wisconsin team that's 16 in the net, Maryland's 18 in the net. Wisconsin's 19-5, Maryland's 18-6. Maryland's a half game back of them in the Big Ten standings. Wisconsin definitely, you look at the quad 1, quad 2 wins. Wisconsin has significantly more quad 2 wins. They're 6-0 in quad 2 games versus Maryland's 3-1. But they have the same quad 1 record. They're both 6-5 in quad 1 games at this point. So if Maryland wants to get a 3, 4, 5 seed, they have to go out and win these next 3 games. These next 3 games, to me, at home, are non-negotiables. Look, Michigan State's a really good team, but that's a game at home. If you want to be a 3, 4, 5 seed, if you want to have these expectations, if you want to be considered a second weekend team, that's a game you absolutely have to win. So they have these 3 games. They have 4 of the last 6 to end the season at home. And to me, you're looking at Maryland right now sitting at 9-5. My expectation for this team with 6 games to go is that they finish out 4-2 or better, that they finish this season out at 13-7 in the league. That is my expectation for this team at this point, and that would be the best conference record Kevin Willard has put up to this point, 11-9 in year 1, 7-13 in year 2, and it would be Maryland's best Big Ten record since it went 14-6 in 2020 and finished in a 3-way tie for first place in the Big Ten. You look at what Mark Turgeon did in Big Ten play since they went to a 20-game schedule, and that 20-game schedule started in 2019. He went 13-7 in 2019, 14-6 in 2020, 9-11 in 2021. So 13-7 is right there among the best that Maryland has ever finished in the 20-game Big Ten schedule era. You go back to the 18-game schedule, he went 8-10, 12-6, 12-6, 14-4, and before that was the ACC. So look, I say all that to say 13-7 is my expectation, and 13-7, it would be an accomplishment. Now, you really want to start talking about accomplishments is finish out 5-1. Go 14-6. Because I think if you can finish 14-6, you are getting the number 3. So you're finishing 3rd in the Big Ten, and you're maybe even finding a way to finish in 2nd. Because right now you have Michigan at the very top, 11-2, Purdue a half game back of them at 11-3, and Michigan State 10-3. I think that the winner of the league, I think you can win the league this season at 15-5. I think 15-5 could get it done. So look, if Maryland could go 14-6, 5-1 over the last 6, they have 4 of 6 at home. I think that could be good enough for 3rd place in the league, and it would allow them to pick up some very good wins the rest of the way. Every game they play the rest of the way is either going to be a quad 1 or quad 2 game. And these next 2 games, Iowa and USC, those are both going to be quad 2 games. Michigan State, of course, is going to be a quad 1 game. At the moment, Penn State on the road is a quad 1 game. They're number 73 in the net, which is just inside that threshold. Michigan, absolutely a quad 1 game. They're number 17 in the net, and that's on the road. And then Northwestern is a quad 2 game. So there's really no bad losses left on this schedule. There's just good wins for Maryland to pick up. There's just opportunity for Maryland to add to the resume the rest of the way and put themselves in a really good position to get a seed that they can advance within the Big Ten tournament and set themselves up for a good seed, a protected seed in the NCAA tournament. So to me at this point, my expectation, let's talk expectation for this Maryland team at this point. I said 6 games left. My expectation is that they go 4-2 or better. They finish at 13-7 in the league. And with that, when I think about what would make this season a success the rest of the way, I am looking at, can they get to a Big Ten tournament final? Can they win a Big Ten tournament? Now, I know that the mileage may vary for some of you on that. For me, winning a conference tournament is a big deal. It's still a big deal to me. It's a major accomplishment. You get to cut down the nets. You get a ring for it. Well, you and me don't, but the players do, the coaches do. You raise a banner. You cut down the nets. You buy a t-shirt if you're us, and you have that memory forever. Winning the Big Ten tournament would be a big deal for me. That would be a big accomplishment for me. And then you look at the NCAA tournament, and I think getting a top 5 seed, getting a 1-5 seed would be an accomplishment. And getting to the second weekend or beyond would be an accomplishment. So for me, the way Maryland can have a good season, look, it's already been a good season, honestly. This team is a ton of fun to watch. I love watching them play basketball 2-3 times a week. But as far as when you start looking at accomplishments that would make this a really memorable season, to me, it's, can you go out and can you win a Big Ten tournament? Can you get a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament? Because I'm a believer that what you want to do with the tournament is you just want to make the tournament as much as possible with as high a seed as possible. And I really think 5 or better is the number. Really, if you're thinking about what do you need to do to win a national title, to me, it's 3 or better. You want to make the tournament with a 3 seed or better as much as possible. This year, I think Maryland's max at this point is a 3 seed, but I think 5 or better gives you a great chance to advance to the second weekend, and you never know what can happen from there. So it's win the Big Ten tournament, get a 5 seed or better, and get to the second weekend or beyond. You know, if you can do 2 of those things, let's call it win the Big Ten tournament and get a 5 seed, but maybe you bail out, you get a bad break, you lose in the second round, right? That's a really good season. If you can get a 5 seed or better, you'll lose in the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament, but you go to a Sweet 16 and Elite 8, absolutely, that's a really good season. So I think 2 of those things would make this a really good season. And I think that speaks to how highly I think of this team, because those are high expectations. And look, Maryland is a place that I think should have high expectations. We can have that conversation much more in the offseason, but Maryland is a place where we have seen you can win and you can win big. And Maryland going on the road and getting to win tonight at Nebraska is just another step in the right direction for what I think this program can be, what I think this particular Maryland team can be. I think this Maryland team, with that starting 5, with the versatility of the team, is a team that can advance in the NCAA tournament, that can win a Big Ten tournament, and tonight was just one more step in the right direction. Thanks so much for tuning in. That's the show for today. I'll be back after the Iowa game on Sunday to break that one down. Until next time, this has been the Route 1 Rundown.